Another video. And today I got my homie Trey. Is it 4L or four? What's the? Is it an
Yeah,
I?
someone
What's
said
going on?
41 the other day. It's an L.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, it's an L.
Trey 41 in the house. Give it a
Yeah.
give,
Woo!
yeah, give him a warm welcome. But yeah, he's been in the community for a long time. In Socionics communities, type bunch of people typed me. You've probably seen him before debating Jack about Elon Musk type, which he thinks is LIE, and then
Mhm.
Jack thinks he's ILE. It's a great video to watch. He has his own channel. He types people. I would check it out. I'll link his channel in the description. And we're just on a tear, just trying to just bring some just the community needs some clarity. So we're trying to go through foundational socionics theory and talk about some misconceptions. If you're new to socionics and you come up from MBTI, there's a lot of misconceptions that you're bringing. Um, and so for this video, we were thinking about just talking about one information element. If you're an MBTI person, that's equivalent-ish to a cognitive function. So extroverted sensing is an information element in socionics. And the last time we talked about SE and force and power, and try to clear that up. But yeah, what are your thoughts about our conversation about SE? And you think we brought some?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think there was certainly, some good insights on that video. It wasn't our intention going in. It was just sort of like another, additional topic to like the 4 or 5 that we covered in that video. So, yeah.
Right.
So,
There's a whole bunch.
yeah, so we didn't really give it our full attention or focus, but yeah, I think there were certainly some insights, but you know, um, just in general, I think it's good to do that with all of the elements, so we can get some good perspective. Just because people can cling to the stereotypes, and not only that, but it's like I think sometimes it's kind of tough to figure out like where the lines are drawn between
Right.
elements. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think one thing that we could definitely hit on as you were talking.
Right.
To process information. What are your thoughts when you hear someone say, "Well, I'm a TI base, which means all my arguments are flawless and you are retarded"?
Wow. So are we doing TI?
Yeah, we might as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, hmm. Here's the thing, right? One of the ways that I really like to understand the elements is by looking at the types that have the mobilizing with the polar for the opposite side of the element, right? So like for logic, for an IEE and for an SCE, they both have TE mobilizing with no TI, right? And
Right.
so when I was getting started, that was how I wanted to learn about that element. It was like, okay, well, if I look at those two types, I'm going to see like a very pure form where it's totally missing its other half. And
Mhm.
and so in those types, yeah, um, I think you'll see IEEs and SEEs make some pretty compelling cases. Mainly, for the SEE, it's mainly when something's like evident and obvious. It's almost just like look at
Mhm.
reality, right? Like if you can't see that, then I don't know what to tell you, right?
Right.
Um, and the moment that someone brings in some, redefines all the variables associated with that thing, they're going to dip out. They're not going to have anything to say about that, or they might get frustrated or just keep pushing their point
Mhm.
because they're not ready for that, right? I mean, they're evidence based, and with IEE, a lot of times I see them grab onto some sort of like ethical idea or like sense of what's right and wrong, and then just attack it with like, well, look, like these are the facts, right? A lot of times, like, it's interesting because like for myself, I'll hear about something that happened in the world, and I'll
Hmm.
immediately have this narrative like perspective on it. But oftentimes it's a disconnect because when I talk to an IEE, they're more focused on like, look, that happened and it sucks, right? And I'm sometimes I'll come in and be like, well, yeah, but that was like a setup from the government or something. I don't know. I'm just coming up with something. But like, you see what I'm saying? Like, like I'm kind of looking at it and seeing that there might be other things in this terrain, and maybe it's not what it appears to be, but they're just looking at the situation, and that's where they connect that to their feelings, right? So feeling
Right.
a lot of empathy for what they're seeing, right? So I
Right.
definitely think like you might run into an IEE who considers himself an intellectual and looks at different perspectives of what it could be, but I think generally they're also going to be pretty evidence based. Um, so yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, that's the main thing, right? Like knowing facts, having information, tying it together is not going to be their strong suit. So as far as debate goes, they better have some good facts. You know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've also noticed that too with TE mobilizing types where they'll scrape off the top of a bunch of sources of information and they just kind of throw that data at you. And if they can't argue logically with kind of going into each case and assessing its coherence, they'll just replace it with another fact.
Yeah.
They'll say, they'll do that thing with like, yeah, but have you seen this thing and this thing? And well, look at, did you read this paper? And you're like, all the papers you're giving me are incoherent. So it doesn't matter if you just replace one piece of bad data. And I'm not saying all of them have bad arguments. I'm not saying that, but the mechanics of the way that they argue is very much evidence based, and they don't want to get into the kind of coherence of the argument, whether or not it makes sense.
Right.
Um, from a structural standpoint. And that kind of gets into the TI component where, yeah, a lot of people will equate um, high intelligence people or people who have like a robust understanding of something with high logic, and in this case, with high introverted logic. Um, and I'm trying to conjure up how, like, why exactly, what is TI doing? What is the information, and why does it not necessarily correlate with having a coherent worldview or a strong argument.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes, well, I don't know if I would say oftentimes, but I know as I'm processing this, a TI base, it's not necessarily that they're right about something. It's not necessarily even that their conclusions are valid or even coherent necessarily. It's really the process they're taking to come to some logical conclusion, right? They want parts to be clearly defined, and they're going to systematically work from premise to premise. Even if that conclusion is false, a TI base is still wanting to understand the logical components that make up this worldview, this philosophy, this idea, this physical structure, this governing body, and they want each independent part to have a certain responsibility, a certain role, a certain function, um, and that's the way that they kind of process information.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, right? When it comes to like the intelligence point you made, at the end of the day, um, it's not about like the TI types are like smarter. It's just a
Hmm.
different kind of intelligence, right? I mean,
Right.
like at the end of the day, like that's what's so interesting about socionics in practice is like when you start looking at certain types of people and how they've used the elements they have at their disposal. That's where that's where you can kind of see where intelligence comes into play, right? Like you just think about, the example that, we talked about with Gandhi on Jack's channel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, in this like extremely nonsensical kind of way, guy gains all these followers, um, due to the circumstances he put himself through, right? And it's like, well, did he like go and like, you know, did he like go conquer lands, or did he like, like prove himself through his abilities? Like, no, that's not what he did at all. But he still managed to gain that following and send that clear message. And so, just in general, with any type, you know, um, it's like how they use that information. I think is that's where you can kind of see the intelligence, because ultimately, like, I'm never going to expect an IEE or an SCE to be able to like build a super coherent, like logically consistent worldview. That's just not what their jam is, right? Uh,
Right.
Maybe one of them is going to be a lot better at it if they put under a lot of pressure, growing up or something, and they can kind of find a way around it. I would honestly expect them to find a way around it more than I would for them to actually address it, right? Like,
Right.
how can they uh, engineer hack the person so that they don't have to answer the question, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, I would almost expect something like that rather than having to, sit down and actually, work out the logical consistency of their point of view. So, but I mean, yeah, ultimately, as far as TI goes, right? It's the external uh, static fields in space. Well, I say it in space, but of logic. So it's the fields between objects. So
Yeah. Relationship based.
it's relationship based, but in a logical, objective way, right? So like, you know, what is my relationship to my backpack, right? Like, what are the relationships between things, and then even further, if we take it more abstract, because that's grounded, that's in the physical. We take it more abstract, we can say, well, what constitutes a couch? What constitutes a cup?
Right.
Right? It has parts. And what's interesting about it is that you can say, well, if we took every cup known to man, like the logical facts, the external observable, evidential logical information, that's TE, right? We could say, well, if we took the intersection of all of those things, what do they all have in common?
Right.
What is their greatest denominator? That's the relationship between the objects, right? So if we ask
Right.
ourselves, what is a cup? We're calling on every cup known in existence, right? To
Right.
boil
Right.
down the principle of what a cup is, right? Um,
Right. Right.
and what's interesting about that is it can also go the other way. Like, that's sort of taking the information from the world and boiling it down into an understanding of it. But there's also building an understanding, that might be completely original, or builds and speaks to what's happening around us.
Right.
Like sort of like how, with beta using TI, it's about rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the principle is made: no shirt, no shoes, no service, right?
Right.
It's like
Right.
that those rules account for a bunch of different situations that I might find myself in. That way, I don't have to pick and choose people who come into my store. I know, like, this is the set rule. I don't have a store, by the way. I just want to be clear about that. But people are like, you're at a gas station. Um, yeah, 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 yeah. So
So TI is trying to fit a bunch of facts underneath it and say there's no partiality, whether you look this kind of way or you did whatever the whole whatever your your race is or your gender is, whatever. You have to wear shoes and you have to wear a shirt and you have to wear
right,
pants. I
right.
don't I don't have to. There's no favoritism. There's no one person that comes in the store and because I like him, he comes in, he can do whatever he wants. He doesn't have to wear partiality. There's a sense of different evaluations, right? A certain person that I might like more than another person might get a different application of a rule, right? That leads to favoritism or nepotism or whatever the case is,
Right.
potentially.
Yeah.
And so TI sees all parts or all people or all things abiding by some general rule. Um, and for the beta types, that obviously can amount to law and order. There are certain laws that are enforceable um, based upon any person's behavior, right? In a
Mhm.
perfect society, those laws would be abided regardless of your status, regardless of any place in the hierarchy that you fit. If you do X, these are the consequences, right? It makes it really efficient when you're in law and order or you're trying to gain control of the situation or a room or a workplace because makes it really easy. Did you do this or did you not? I don't care who you are. You're fired or you're fine. like, um,
Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to throw this in there, right? Like, um, oh, I was just gonna say, but that doesn't mean like if a TE or FI type owns a store, that's how they're gonna run it, right? But that is the type of information,
mhm.
and the difference between them. I just wanted to like kind of give you that.
100%. Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
just to contrast that, I mean, a TE base might say that the store is going to run inefficiently if you don't have rules. Like the TE
Right.
base understands the requirement of rules, right? The ignoring is still present, but they're still seeing what's happening in front of them based upon their base. It's not the rule in and of itself. It's about whether or not this would lead to inefficiencies or waste or whatever the case is. So that's the thing. Everybody has all of the elements. We all use them in a different way.
Right.
And the intelligence component, like you said, is more related to uh, whether or not you value that element and if you're strong. That's what you can actually produce and provide to society. Even if your conclusions are false, the fact that you're pushing the needle and suggesting alternatives or um, you have some different perspective that's native to you shows that even if you're wrong, you can still be productive towards that end of solving some problem using your
Mhm.
base function,
Mhm.
using your ego block. Um, because society needs what it lacks, and if you have it, then you're going to obviously try to step in and fill it.
Right.
Um, but I was also thinking about we talked about SE, how one misconception about SE is that yeah, you're picking fights at a bar constantly. You're always aggressive. You're always just a chaotic individual. How do you think that that would relate to being a TI base? Does that kind of lead to the notion that like a misconception might be that TI bases have rules for absolutely everything? They're just so
Mm.
overly structured, or does it kind of get to our point where it's like um, they know where structure is necessary, and that's actually when they might feel the need to offer it. They're not always just trying to enforce or to create rules just for its own sake.
Yeah. I'm actually gonna pivot right here because it reminded me of something that I've noticed with myself in time. Right. You know, NI isn't just about time. There's a lot more to it than that. But I think that I often sort of take it for granted and just kind of use it. I just kind of use it. It's almost like, you know, I seem to always know when to leave and when to arrange things so that at the end of the day, like I get there right on time. And
Mm,
so most of the time, like that's how I live my life. I don't like make like a margin for like I don't make a big margin for like making sure I arrive at a place at a given time. Like I pretty much just like take it for granted, and I'm just like, oh well, this is when I need to arrive. And so long as I don't even know if I always think of a time exactly. I just know that like if I leave at this time or that time, like I'll be fine.
mhm,
And so I think in a lot of cases, like we all sort of do that with our base a little bit, when it comes to the basic or simple things, I think for a TI type, they'll probably I don't necessarily think it means that everything in their life is structured, but I definitely think that when they give something attention, they'll understand it through structure, because the thing is, the base is such an overwhelming force of your attention that I think ultimately, basically everything you do is going to be characterized by that for the most part. Like for example, you look at an SLE type, right? Like SLE may look at a situation and think about their relationship to it or their power dynamic in a situation, and they may choose to sort of take the lower hand, or they may choose to like diffuse the situation, or they may choose. But the thing is, the key here is that they're always understanding it through that frame, right? They're always understanding it through, well, like, do I push here or do I sit back, right? And it's that characterization of the situation where you're seeing it through power dynamics and not through some other lens that makes it, an SLE's perception, where, I think generally an SLE is going to understand the world in terms of power dynamics, in terms of force, in terms of how much pressure they put on something, in terms of their drive, and and their force of will. But similarly, for a TI type, it's going to be the same. It's going to be about laws. It's going to be about their understanding. It's about how things are logically related to one another, right? And um, their overall functioning or understanding, right? So these comments.
No, I haven't even been looking at them.
It's funny. At the beginning of the of the video, Porcupine Jason was like, "He's supposed to be talking to me.
Yeah,
I feel cheated
I
on."
saw that. I got him, boy.
Yeah,
Cook him. Cook him.
yeah, yeah. I'm a typology hoe today.
Just get passed around, brother.
Yeah.
I'm weak. Yeah. No, I mean it's good though. It's good to have. I mean, I feel like there's kind of like a new a new vibe or whatever the word is, new energy going towards like the better socionics videos, just trying to get to the hardest stuff. But um I do like what you said about your worldview. It's kind of your frame of reference. I've seen this many times, especially with SLE too. I mean, my dad, everything is uh, fight oriented. I mean, he'll tell me stories. He's always like, what would happen if a gorilla got in a fight with a bear?
This sounds like the Joe Rogan experience.
No, for real. That's literally
Yeah,
what that is.
yeah.
And I'm like, it's a gorilla, and we get into it. We're like looking at like the weight of like a bear or a gorilla. Like, okay, in this
Y'all are like
situation,
googling. This is
yeah, oh yeah,
this is what the dumb censors do.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all we have. That's all that. If you look at our Google search, that's going to be gorilla destroys.
What is the average weight of a gorilla?
Right.
What is the
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 bench press.
pound feet of torque of their fist or
Oh
some shit?
yeah. Just in case something popped off and you have to fight a gorilla, you're like, what could happen? Um, but yeah, it's definitely like your base is definitely your primary frame of reference. And I mean, it's kind of the same thing with like an SC base. People always think that you're always getting in fights, or you couldn't lose a fight, or I I feel like, I mean, I get why people have those kind of conceptions of the base, but I think some part of that is just MBTI's over focus on not necessarily behaviorism, but I think that's a part of it. It's just like all ENTJs and MBTI are conquering the world. Your ENTJ is going to cuss you out. Expect this. They all do this, and you're like, what's going on here? That can't be a sufficient answer. Um, like that's not realistic. I don't buy it.
Yeah.
Or just like what you were talking about with extrovert intuition. It's like they're not this like spaz ADHD squirrel kind of individual. They're actually in the moment, and they recognize one idea, something that comes into their field of perception that has potential, and that's what they're kind of calling forth. That's what they're highlighting. That's what they're focusing on. It's not that they're just constantly in this stream of conscious generating idea after idea, because it's also devaluing. Like when you actually think about an incessant generation of your base's information, would that not just devalue that information? Would it not make it significant if you're always getting in fights that you know about force so well that you're always starting stuff? It's like that's actually that just devalues the information. If
Mhm.
you're always generating possibilities, do you actually recognize which ones actually has the most potential? Maybe not, right? It's the supply and demand issue. It's like if
Yeah.
it's always coming out all the
See,
time incessantly, it's like, so
this makes me think of something pretty critical. I feel like where there's a common misconception in definitions
mhm,
between the aspect, which is about the information in general, like outside of a person. What if we had to find this information in reality? Where would we find it? That's what an
right.
aspect is, right? It's not necessarily how a person's processing it. It's not the way a person wields it. It's where do I find it? This is where it is, right?
Mhm,
So, for example, what I said earlier about loss, right? Like it's external, right? So it doesn't have to do with any internal process of mine. It's
mhm,
external. It's logical or objective, um, and it's statics of fields, right? So it's something that's not changing very often, and it's a field of information, a logical, objective, external field, right? There you go. So now we can just ask ourselves, all right, well, what is this information? What does it pertain to, right? And we can start to understand its components and how it's related to other things.
mhm,
Like maybe there's another element involved. Maybe we're looking at like an intuitive's version of TI, right?
mhm,
But I think that generally there's a disconnect because at the end of the day, like, yeah, maybe if we're reading these elements, well, we can say, well, if like for example, let's take force. If you understand what force is, um, then you can look at that outside of a person. Um, but then you could also look at it within a person and say, okay, well, what does that mean in an individual, right?
mhm.
Okay, well, does it mean that they're always going to be packing a punch, or does it mean that they're like something I kind of think of, which is a little bit silly, but like is like imagine someone might say, well, like everything that this type does is forceful, right?
Right,
That's
right,
so absurd. With
right.
like if someone needs to go to the bathroom and they sit on the toilet, like how is that going to be any different than the way that any other type does it?
That's how. That's just
Right?
get out.
Maximum force and pressure,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
When I
Just paint
when
the
I when
toilet.
I take my shit, total exertion. It
Nothing
sounds
left
like
in
a
the tank.
comedy skit. Sounds like something like you remember that guy on Napoleon Dynamite that has the dojo.
Yeah,
Sounds like
yeah.
something he would say, right? Like when I take my shit, it's in total exertion.
Right.
It's like this is stupid,
Yeah,
right?
it's cartoonish.
It's like if you're sitting at your desk, like you work on the computer, you have a job where you work on the computer. Yeah, you know what I mean? It makes
Yeah.
no sense. Or like it doesn't mean that like you're gonna be so focused on like when you type on the keyboard, like you're gonna be thinking about the amount of pressure you're putting on the key.
Right, it's absurd.
Like what? So I don't know. Like it's just like you have to like there's some level of common sense that you have to have, and like what is it likely to look like if I instilled an individual with a focus on this type of information, right?
Right.
Like that doesn't mean you're going to get some like wonky character that like every time they think a thought they think about how powerful and a or forceful it is,
Yeah.
or like whatever. Like it's not going to be some like weird. It's going to be an individual. It's going to be a
It's gonna be
regular person.
yeah, it's gonna be real life,
Right.
real examples.
Yeah. And so that's another thing. Like that's why it's so important to get like exposure to
Mhm.
different types so you can see what it looks like. And you have to be careful about that too, because it's like, well, if someone's not typed right and you're starting to understand the theory based on that, I've
Right.
seen people rebuild the theory based on their faulty understanding of type. They literally create a backwards socio. I've
Uh.
seen it. It's real. I'm not even exaggerating right now. I've seen someone create a whole variation of socionics based on their incorrect typing. It's
That's a
absurd
huge
because you're
that's a
like, wait, you're like, this information that you're describing as this is actually this information element. It's actually
right.
consistent backwards,
Yeah.
right?
That's megacope. Just create a whole new
Megacope.
system.
There
Yeah,
you go.
that's
Yes, exactly.
Cope
Megacope.
Supreme.
So, um, so yeah.
Yeah.
Go
Can I
ahead.
say something real quick?
Yeah,
Just
jump
for
in.
this is a little rant interjection. Why would you do that? Why would you? What? Just how someone goes from I'm mistyped. It puts all the effort and energy to recreate another system to justify their false sense of self. Wouldn't it take less energy to just say you're wrong? Like just say, just fold them, brother. It's cool. We make mistakes. It's not hard.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
makes no sense to me. And it also shows a high level of intellectual dishonesty. It's like this has a definite definition. These are clear, distinct categories. You can't just manipulate them any way you want to. You can't just say SE isn't force or SE has no bearing on concrete reality and say it's something abstract. You're like, that's not what it's a sensing element. It
right.
tells you what you should funnel stuff into it, right? It's saying that's like someone taking a little like those little baby squared those little those little toys and you put the circle in the triangle position and you're like, "No, it's a triangle." You're like, "No, it's not. That's why it doesn't fit there, brother. It doesn't go in. It's telling you you're wrong."
Yeah,
Like that's just that's just how that works, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. I do want to take us a different direction with Ti and a little bit because I think it's kind of worth talking about Ti in a way that's, I guess, more simplistic. So, something that I it kind of came to mind the other day that I haven't thought about in a long time
Mhm.
is how Ti and Fe as an axis is oriented towards the group or the collective,
Right.
right? And this is like one of those. I don't know. I kind of think of it as a beginner understanding because like pragmatically, like when you're trying to use socionics in your life, it's harder to be like, oh, is this person collectivistic or is this person
Yeah.
individualistic? Like you
Mhm.
can you can do that and it can work, and in a lot of cases that actually can help you type somebody. But I think oftentimes it's better to default to the understanding the element, but I think the axis is important too, or the values, right? So like with Ti and Fe, it's you're looking at someone who's often going to be concerned with keeping up with their appearance for other people, right? And
Mhm.
how they project themselves, or how people are, or keeping up with the environment, keeping up with, in a social setting. There might be like certain expectations, or there might be like a certain sense of like, can you carry along with this?
Right.
And the Fi types are going to stand out and be like, you know, I mean, depending on their degree of capability with FE, you see like a TE base, they're more than likely, or an FI base, they're more than likely just gonna recall back and be like, no, this is like not what I think about this. Like this
Mhm.
is how I feel about this, right? It's like, okay, so you're gonna be standing out. You're not gonna necessarily be concerned with, when everyone's talking about something, sort of contributing to that. Instead,
Mhm.
you're going to be like, well, look, this is my personal feelings on the matter, right?
Mhm.
And staying true, or having integrity to oneself, right? And I think that's like an important understanding of the type, because when we talk about Ti and Fe, like I have this analogy that I've used in the past that super simplifies it, but it's looking at a table and objects on it, right? If we take um, Te and Fi, right? That's the Te represents the movement of the objects on the table,
Mhm.
and Fi represents like the objects themselves, right? So it's like, okay, if I have a bunch of objects on a table, a couple cups or whatever, and I move one cup towards another cup, right? This is an analogy for the way that TEFI types evaluate relationships. They say, oh, well, because that cup moved from this one to that one, it values that cup,
Right.
right? And so its movement is characterized by, the things that it finds important,
Right.
right? And so there's a lot of things baked into this example, right? For one, um, it's evidence oriented, right? We're looking at the actions, and we're saying, okay, well, based on your actions, you're showing a clear indication of these values. But there's
Mhm.
also an implicit part there, right? I'm assuming that that's the value system based
Right.
on the movement, right?
Mhm.
And you could say that by moving one object to another object, there's an investment happening, right?
Right.
So like, the way this applies to people is, if I'm if I if someone's in a if I'm in a group setting and someone in the group, like I go to defend them, right?
Right.
From the outside looking in, that could mean that I value that person more than the other people in the group, right?
Right.
Whereas realistically, what may actually be happening is I just feel like they're left out of the group, and I'm trying to include them, right?
Right.
But this is the difference in perspective, right? Like you with TE and FI, you're focused on the actions and what they're saying about the investment you're making and what you value, right? Whereas when you go back to TI and FE, the example I use the same sort of example, but I say that TI is the table,
Right.
right? And FE is the interactions within it. TI contains the interactions, right? So it's not that with that situation of TI and FE, it's not that any interaction that happens within the table is within the confines of the table, and so therefore it's it's adhering to that table, I suppose. The moment
Right.
something falls outside of the confines of that table, it's no longer within the bounds
Right.
of that table. And in the same
Mhm.
sense, the TIFE types are evaluating these relationships differently, because they're saying, well, um, at the end of the day, I'm having these interactions with these people, but this is that's within the confines of this rule or this law, right? These are the boundaries of this conversation. These
Right.
are the boundaries of this interaction, right? And so, it's kind of like I even think of a situation where maybe a TI, someone that's a TI type, and someone that's an FI type that's in a relationship.
Mhm.
And I've seen a lot of this firsthand, so I know what it looks like. Um, maybe the TI type sees a social situation and they're like, okay, well, we're all joking around and saying things that aren't necessarily true. It's a very lighthearted atmosphere. And
Right.
so they might say something obscene or absurd because they're just trying to contribute to like the
Interaction.
characterized group
Right.
energy, right?
Right. Right.
And so they're like, this is what we're doing right now. This is the vibe
Right.
we're on. So I'm going to contribute to that, right?
Mhm.
But that thing that you said, that obscene thing, might be looked at from an FI type and go, oh, that fucker just broke his loyalty with me. He said
Right.
this, right? And so like there's a difference there, right? Because the main difference is the TI and FE type is just focused on you know that characterized group energy, and and contributing to it, right?
Right.
Whereas, the FI type is always in that place of, is this who I am? Is this how I feel? Right?
Right.
And so if that's not true, they're probably going to be quiet. They might fade into the background, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not to say all FI types would do that. Some are going to be, a little bit more, a little better with FE, for example. But most of the time, FITE, axis or those types, they're going to be focused on everything that they do is representation of what they value,
Right.
right? And so there's a sense of integrity there, right? Whereas the other way around, it's like, well, just because I tell a joke,
Yeah.
right, doesn't mean that that's how I feel, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so there's a difference because it's a subtle distinction, but it's a significant one because
Mm-hmm.
both people are evaluating the same situation based on those differences. So
Right.
if they it'll lead to a situation where it's like, wait, that was a serious break for me, right?
Right.
You said this, and if that's really how you feel, that's a problem, right?
Right. Right.
It's like, okay, well, and that person doesn't see it the same way because they're just not evaluating things the same way, or they're not. That's not how they're based or oriented, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just felt like it was important to bring that in because, you know, that's like a look at the difference in like how a TI type is likely to manage relationships, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's definitely true. I think that there's a kind of deep, personal way of interacting with FETI types where kind of like what you're alluding to, where it's like there's an energy that happens by the way that we say things, by the way we express, by the way we react to what other people are saying. If someone says something stupid, we're like, you're dumb. Like, there's a kind of energetic relationship happening when you get a group of people in the same room. And none of that is indicative of the character of the person directly. Could it be? Possibly. It's possible it could be. Um, but the whole intention behind FE types, FE and TI types in those kind of engagements is to just reciprocate some kind of mutual energy and kind of bounce off of one another. And that can take on many different forms. Obviously, we know for beta types it takes on a more antagonistic form because they have SE also blocked or included in their valued elements. So it takes on kind of a kind of contentious, rough, even more audacious and kind of out there. But it's funny too how types they kind of like the terms for endearment, like with beta types, if you're roasting each other and going back and forth, it's kind of an anecdote, but I feel like universally, a lot of times beta types will say that that's the way that there's a there's a bond formed by something that's already impersonal, which is kind of ironic. It's like
Hmm.
it's not a serious thing, but can you take a joke? Can you tell that this is we both roast each
Right.
other, we're kind of feeding off each other's energy,
That's
and it's
interesting.
just
Yeah.
yeah. Whereas an FI type, every action or every word spoken has some kind of character latent aspect to it. It's indicative of the kind of person you are. So a
Mhm.
kind of person would make this crazy joke of which I don't want to
Right.
relate with, right? I'm not
It's
attracted towards.
it's so funny. My old ESI roommate, I would tell a joke sometimes, and he'd look at me like he didn't know who I was.
Yeah, yeah.
He'd be like, is that like really like? It's funny. It's
It's
funny
very
because
funny.
sometimes I do things that surprise myself. Like
Right,
I'll
right.
say or do things that I'm like, dude, like where did that come from?
Right.
It doesn't necessarily speak to who I am, besides the fact that maybe I'm just like a fool that you know, that just does crazy, ridiculous, weird things.
Yeah,
The,
yeah.
the other day, this is ridiculous. The other day, I was at work and I saw a friend and he was like on his break. He was like playing a video game
Mhm.
and I knew he knew The Witcher. You know The Witcher.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know why, but in my head came that song, "Toss a coin to your Witcher," right? And so like out of nowhere, just felt it and like
You threw it at him?
sprung up. I sprung up and I ran over to him and I did this whole like musical number behind his head. I was like I grabbed his shoulder and I was like, toss a coin to your witcher. And then I went to the other side of his shoulder. It's like, oh, valley of plenty. And then like I was like, oh, what? Oh, like I don't know, like just like out of nowhere, like had no idea what came over me. And then afterwards, I was like, what just happened? Like, and I think about it, and I'm like, that was so weird. And like everyone's here, like, but like like everyone saw that. Um, but that's just like that's sometimes that's just the way that I express myself, I guess.
Yeah.
um like did I sit there and carefully think over like like what's what's something that I really like that I want to put out there, like you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
Like
Ev
something that really speaks to who I am, like would it really be me if I went out there and just started singing this musical number? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like I didn't think that at all. I just found myself expressing, pushing it out there.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
I think FI types think FE types have a cheap way of expressing themselves.
Yes.
It's cheap. It's kind of like organic in the moment. There's no like character evaluation to it. So to them, they would see that as like, why are you expressing yourself that way to that person? Right?
Well, that just made me think, right? Like, yeah, I agree with your point, but it made me think it kind of happens in reverse too, because a lot of times I think that TI types will hear like someone kind of come out and say the way they feel about things,
Hmm.
and I think a lot of times it's discounted because it's like, oh, okay, but that's just how you feel. That has nothing to do with you know they're trying to evaluate it based on whether it makes sense.
Hmm.
And so because of that difference, it's like if someone comes out and says how they feel about it, you know it's like, well, is that something we can sort of account for everybody,
Oh,
right?
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and if not, then because like expressing how you feel
I
is
see that.
important. The expression of feeling is important for a TI type because
Right.
they take those expressions and they're like, okay, well, we can restructure this, right?
Yeah.
And account for that.
Right. There's a
Uh,
rule.
yes, as a rule that applies to everybody. But when
Right.
you bring a feeling in that is specific or unique to you, where you need special or different treatment, that's no longer something that can be addressed via rule, right?
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah, it's more personal.
and I've seen TI types do that though, where they're like,
Yeah.
well, I have to account for this individual, so I create a whole new set of rules. I've seen I've seen it, but they don't like
Yeah.
it.
No,
Yeah, go ahead.
that's very relatable because if someone I know for myself, if someone has a certain emotional reaction or way of expressing themselves, that to me seems like universally is not warranted because I would start imagining myself or other people in a similar circumstance. And as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, no one I know would ever react this way. Like you don't have to react. You, like the way that you're reacting doesn't warrant itself based upon what you experienced because many people have experienced the same thing and didn't react in the same way.
Right.
So that's the way that I gauge emotional reactions is like, does this actually fit with the situation globally? And if
Right.
it doesn't, then it's like that's an invalid form of it. Like if someone said something you didn't like and you just started bursting out in tears, like even if it was light, it wasn't anything. Everyone, this is the thing that also everyone would know you're overreacting, right? Everybody would be like, this is that you crying is not warranted by this slight, subtle remark. So what people are implying is that there are certain rules or certain kind of norms of expressing. Basically, your expression has to fit to some degree or be congruent with the situation,
Right.
right? If someone makes you mad, do you just punch them in the face because you're mad? No, you'll go to jail. So it's like there is that kind of TIFE thing where it's like, yeah, the best situation is where you have an emotional expression that's fair, valid, whatever. But it's not so far over the rule that people look at you like Why are you doing that? That doesn't fit. So that's always a kind of balance, and that's also the way that rules and expression go together, right? If you don't like the president, you can't just you know break in the White House and
Oh,
purport cuss him out. It's like you can express yourself within the confines of the rules. You can't just do that. You can't just break in the White House and say I hate you. It's like that's not how a society will work. Like that's gonna be a terrible, you know, like, you can be mad at your parents and you can, explain your reasoning, but if you cuss them out, you're gonna get your ass whooped. It's like
right,
like, there are certain checks and balances always implied in any relationship regarding a rule and expression, always, whether they're
right,
explicit or they're implied. If
right.
you just if you just started crying right now, I'd be like, "What's going on?" Right? Or if I did, you'd be like, "What's going on? This doesn't make sense. Why are you crying?"
That's
Um,
not what I'd say.
well, fair enough.
I'm
But
like,
you
you
would
little bitch. No, I'm just kidding. Getting emotional. What the
Yeah,
hell?
stop your crying, boy. Um, but yeah, people have automatic reactions to things, and that's usually how you can tell whether it's, like, collectively accepted or not. When
Oh,
people kinda give you the why they do that, it's because you probably did something stupid. That's that's all I need to go off of, like,
so
um
okay, I wanna focus on something because I think it's important for people who are like coming to socionics, right? Like, if you have like, because all the things we're talking about sort of speak to these types, but like they don't give a sense of like what you can expect from the person like on the surface, right? Like gives you a sense of how they work, gives you a sense of like what they're focused on. But like if I need to identify one, like how do I do that, right? Like and I think just generally speaking, for TI, it's going to be someone who's, I mean, honestly, having conversations like this, right? Like most of what we're talking about here is about. I mean, we're talking about introverted logic, right? We're talking about the structure and how this rule applies, how this concept applies
Mhm,
to the world, right? And we're kind of going back and forth and describing the instances that might be exceptions or that might further characterize how a situation is handled, right? So
mhm,
we're describing the laws or we're describing the understanding, the logical consistency of this concept, right?
mhm,
So that's something that, this whole thing that we're doing, we're both TI valuing types.
mhm.
This is not something you see typically from TEFI types, right? And if you do see it, it's not going to be discussed the same way, right?
Right,
It's going to be more focused on, kind of what I'm trying to switch gears to now, which is, how to use it, right? Like
right.
how it's practical and the way it applies to your life, right? Um, that's going to be, the orientation. So that's why a lot of, socionics is filled with TI capable types or, and sometimes, I've mentioned before that you also get like relational oriented types. Like I think there's a lot of ESIs in the community that really couldn't care less about the theory and are just here for like people.
That's a fact.
Um, and I'm not saying that they're all like that, but I certainly think most of them are.
Mhm,
Um, and that's just because it's indicative of their type. Like they're not gonna like really be concerned with like TI as much.
mhm,
Um, and and so, but yeah, someone that is discussing those things, or maybe even more isolated. You and I are both socially oriented types because we have FE and reach, right? Like FE is
mhm,
my creative function, FE is your mobilizing function. But then you look at LSI, right? And they're sort of detached, they're removed, they're loners,
mhm,
right? Um, but um, but they're still using introverted logic. They have a methodology, they have an approach, they have a systemic understanding of the way that they operate, right?
mhm,
Or that systemic knowledge is what dictates the way they operate, right?
Right.
That's the whole place they're coming from. And as well as you take like, well, for LSI, it's going to be someone who's got like they've got a reason, or like a, a deeper system for everything that they do. They're going to be rigid, disciplinarian type, right? Like, yeah, well, I don't know. I was going to use an example, but
Yeah, I was going to ask
I
you
think of
about.
Tywin Lannister is my favorite, or one of my favorite
Oh, that
LSIs.
is. Is it a
Oh,
character? Are you doing
it
TV? You're a
is.
big TV guy, dude. You're a big like character from TV. I don't do that. I don't watch a lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so it's Game of Thrones,
Oh, okay.
and basically, like, he's like this quiet ruler. He's interesting because he's like really stubborn, and he's all about his family legacy. And so, like, anytime somebody, um, and like, he'll just like infringe on his children and be like, "This is what you're going to do for the good of the family legacy," right? And like, no care at all about how they feel about it.
Right.
You know, total disregard for FI. Just like, look, this is what I'm forcing onto you, and you're gonna do it, and you're not gonna bitch about it either. And like, and his, to the detriment of his children, who don't want to marry that person or whatever for power reasons, but he's always sort of taking that, uh, like, he's always doing the thing that's going to, you know his values put aside, like, because he does have values about his family legacy that's not intrinsic to LSIs, but
Mhm.
like, the fact that he's focused on only doing the logical course of action, and he always frames everything in accordance with that.
Mhm.
He's got a logical system. And so anytime someone says, "Oh, well, this is how I feel about this," or "This is what I want," or whatever, he's like, "Doesn't matter."
Right.
Right? Like, this is not in accordance with, like, what we're doing, right?
Mhm.
It's not in accordance with the structure. This is not in accordance with, what makes the most sense for our family, etc.
Mhm.
Um, and he's actually the most powerful person in the show. He's not the king, but he's like the quiet power in the background, right?
Mhm.
Um, but he's that serious, stoic, withdrawn personality that will assert power when he needs to. Even,
Right.
it's funny. Even when, like, Joffrey, which is his grandson, is terrible king. He's like,
Mhm.
he manages to make you hate him when you watch the show. You
Yeah.
hate his guts. He's terrible. Um, he he will, like, get pissed and put someone's head on a spike and just does not care, right?
Right.
And his grandfather will come up, and Joffrey will be like, "Oh, well, like, don't talk to the king that way." And then if he says that to his grandfather, like, he'll literally be like, it's so smooth the way that LSIs do it, man. He'll literally just look over, and he'll be like, to somebody else, he'll be like, "Escort the king to his chambers. Like, he needs some rest." You know what I mean? It's like,
Oh, yeah, it's implied threat.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like he took control of the situation, but he basically said, like, "You're stepping out of line.
Right.
That's not your place," right? And he didn't actively refute what the person was saying or doing. Instead, he indirectly refuted it
Right.
because it's not even worth his time, which is
Right.
crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but like, so I just want to give a characterization of, like, what a TI type looks like. That's the LSI version. Then you have the LII version, which is super intellectually oriented, and they're not
Mhm.
really applying pressure or force on anybody, but they have a logical understanding of the world that's really abstract,
Mhm.
probably oriented towards physics and um, like a deeper reality, right?
Mhm.
But always, measuring it by this, like, logical system. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I just felt like that was important to put out there too.
Yeah, that's good.
Mm.
I guess we could probably end it on that note.
Yeah,
Yeah, man, that was good. We'll probably do more. I mean, I definitely think we'll do more videos. It'd be worth like,
yeah. This was just TI.
Yeah, we got to get through all of them. But yeah, guys, you guys should watch tonight. I think in an hour or so, right? You're doing a video with Porcupine Jason about socionics and typing methods and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, in like 45 minutes, 42, 43 minutes.
Let's
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Let's get it. You guys check it
So,
out. It's gonna be good. We're clearing up. It's the Socionics brothers back in action.
hell yeah. Yeah, man. And we
Let's
got a
go.
bunch more elements to do. So
Oh
we'll be
yeah.
back at it. Yeah, we're just going to talk about typing, like how to type people, and what the what are some good tactics or ways to uncover the truth. We've talked about this, I'm sure, before. So
Mhm.
that's going to be the topic of conversation. I think he has some thoughts on it as well. So
Nice.
yeah.
Looking forward to it. All
All
right,
right.
y'all. I think we're signing off. One love.
Yeah.
Stay black. Peace.
Very black.